Hi, everyone. I'm Woody Zuill, and I'm here to share some ideas. I'll explain it as I go. But when I first started programming, which was around 1982, I didn't know anybody else that I could talk with frequently. I knew some programmers, but not that many, and I did most of the learning that I did by reading magazine articles and books and trying the things out, copying code from some printed sheet. And so, there was not a lot of opportunity to do teamwork. And then somewhere around, 1998, I heard about pair programming. And the first thing I did was, I thought, I'd love to try that. What would that be like? And then once I found a couple people that had been doing it, and they started showing me, and they taught me some things. Then very shortly after that, I think in 2001, I read an article about something called mob programming. So I didn't invent the term, and I didn't invent the way of working of mob programming. It was clearly people were already thinking about working as a larger group than a pair. Matter of fact, I read an article just yesterday or 2 days ago. Well, maybe I found out about it about a week ago. But then it was talking about some people doing pair programming in 1953. Okay? That was the year I was born. They didn't bother asking me about it, right? So this has been around a long time. Let's learn how to collaborate. There is a group in Paris that started experimenting with some of these ideas. I'm not sure exactly when, but I think 2003 or something like that, and working with ways that you can do at least a social activity of everybody gathering together to write code. And they still do it to this day. And I attended a dojo there just 2 weeks ago, or a little more than that. What is your group called now? Dojo?
Dojo Development Paris.
Dojo Development Paris. I think that means Dojo Development Paris. I'm not sure. I don't speak much French. I can understand only a tiny bit of it. So that's enough introduction. Whenever I talk about this, I also always say this first. This quote from Peter Block: "I'm not here to tell you what to do." That would be presumptuous of me, that I could even think that I knew how to tell you what you should do. I just share the things that we've done and what I think about it, and maybe you can get some ideas from me, just like I got ideas from the people who originated the concept of the coding dojo. Because when I combined my way of working with their way of working, it just made it better. So that's what this is about. I'm going to give you a really fast introduction. Maybe I should ask first, how many of you already know about mob programming, software teaming? Show of hands. Only a few of you maybe never heard of it before. How many of you do it frequently, kind of frequently? So many less of you. Maybe I should ask about pair programming. How many of you do pair programming frequently? Yeah, okay. Now this is a large number of people, but that's probably because we're at a craft conference as compared to what I would consider a typical programming conference. But I did a talk I've actually given several talks at the XP conference, and it's still not much more than 10 or 15% of the people regularly doing pair programming when I take a poll like that. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick introduction. I've started calling this software teaming. I want to say this. The reason I did that is because originally I just borrowed the term mob programming that was in the article I read from 2001, but I found some people felt it had negative connotations. Plus, a lot of people would say, oh, I'm a tester, or I'm a designer, or I'm a product owner, so I don't do programming, so this isn't for me. So I wanted to take the word programming out, but since I focus on software development, software teaming. And I got the term teaming from Amy Edmondson's book on teaming. It wasn't a book about software development, but it's a book I think that's quite an important book that talks about the importance of teaming in our modern work. or working as a team, of becoming great at collaboration, so that we can start collaborating the moment we join a team. Rather than taking time to figure out how are we going to work together, we've built our own skills of working well with a team. Okay, let's go on. We're going to work on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, and at the same computer. To me, this is sort of what Agile is about. I think the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto knew in the 1990s that we were often not working on the same thing at the same time. Somebody would work on something 6 months before I do. Maybe they wrote some requirements. Then somebody along the way made an architecture. And it finally gets to me to write some code. We're really not collaborating much. We're not working on the same thing, and certainly not at the same time. By doing it in the same space, that just accentuates or amplifies our ability to work well with each other. We can ask questions and talk in the same moment we're doing the work. And since we're at the same computer, it kind of proves we're paying attention to the same thing. Okay, so the overarching idea is if we can gather together all the skills and knowledge that we need, then we don't need to go off the team to get our questions answered, and we can work directly on almost anything we do, from start to finish. We can work directly, and that means when we're working as a mob programming or software teaming team, there's almost no queuing or blocking, waiting for getting answers to things. We get to accentuate our ability to I think, maintain flow, and therefore that's what this talk is about. So when we work this way, this is what it looked like. This is what I would consider an ideal team. There's a tester, a product owner, a coder, a database expert, a coder, and a coder. For the particular work we were doing on this particular session, we could answer all of our own questions. We could write the thing we're writing, deploy it to the actual end users, and go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. This allows us to work really, really quickly. It doesn't mean we're working faster or harder. I want to make that really clear. We actually, at the end of the day, and we work this way every day, all day long. Not everybody does, and I'm not saying you have to, but what we found was that when we did this, we actually, at the end of the day, felt we didn't get much done. But if we looked over at our board, this represents probably the last few days of what we did. And each one of these, as we did the work, we would come up with yellow cards that said, what's the next step, the next step. So if we picked something off of here, we just think about, well, what are we going to do first? And we start doing it, and those cards move over really quickly. We found at the end of the day, we actually got a lot done, but it didn't feel like we worked hard. It didn't feel like we were busy all day. Busy is a bad thing, by the way. We'll have another talk on that sometime. Invite me back next year. Yeah. So it's not 5 people watching one person coding, and that's how some people think of it. It's almost the opposite. There's somebody at the keyboard, but their job isn't to be thinking about the problem we're solving or the solution we're trying to come up with. Their job is to merely act as a smart input operator for the rest of the team. So the rest of the team isn't blocked by trying to think about the details. We're thinking about the slightly bigger thoughts. We don't code out loud when we're doing this. We're talking in concepts quite a bit more. In this case, we use this old-fashioned pair programming idea that I learned in 1998. The idea that there's a driver, like in a taxi cab. You get in the taxi cab, you sit down, you don't say, where should we go today, to the taxi cab driver. They ask you, where do you want to go today? That's sort of the same model here. And everybody's a navigator. So if we all got in the same taxi together, we all are going to the same place. Same kind of idea. So this seems kind of crazy, but we use this from Zuill and Falco. Some of you might know Zuill and Falco, I'm sure some of you do. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. So this is the basics of how we did mob programming. It's pretty straightforward, but it seems crazy. There are people doing it all over the world. Just 2 or 3 things I'll point out. As you look at these, quickly we'll go through these pictures, you'll notice that everybody works a little differently. Some of them are set up for a lot of comfort, which I think is important. Some of them not so comfortable, which I think is a problem they need to solve. But you'll also see there's some similarities, and you'll also see it looks like everybody's staying engaged. Each one of these, I particularly like this picture, which came from GDS in London. Those people are focused. These people are focused. Everybody's focused on the work. People often ask me, how do you keep people engaged when you're working this way? I don't. They just keep engaged. They stay focused. And I believe that in doing this work, it's easier for us to stay focused than when we're working alone. I don't know if there's any proof of that. It just feels that way to me. It's certainly easy for me to focus on something when we're moving really fast and it's interesting, and we're seeing the results quickly. So that makes it easy. So we'll just skip through this. Just some idea. There's one picture there that might be, I was maybe 6 years old, but when I saw this picture, as I was gathering pictures, I thought, that looks like they're mob programming, doesn't it? They're all working together, all the same people at the same time in the same space. And look at this, I even think they've got a scrum master making sure they're working hard. Yeah, not really. Yeah, so this is a big problem. I was only 5 or 6 years old. They should have called me and asked my opinion. And I would have told them, you need to get a big monitor. What's wrong with you? As eventually people did get big monitors, proven by this picture. They took my advice. Now, they don't even know I exist, right? But this is NASA Mission Control. It looks a lot like mob programming to me. We have gathered all the skills we need to do the mission. Everybody here at each one of these workstations has their own expertise. And up here, they've got those big screens I recommended to Grace Hopper. So there we go. All righty, someone caught on. They're all paying attention to the details and how it fits into the bigger picture. Okay, now let's get to the, I'm going to move quite a bit forward now. Why would we work this way? It's quite simple. There's a lot of good reasons to work this way. That's not the point. That is not the point. All of these things, when I do this in the workshop, I ask people, why would we work this way? And they come up with these things and more. But I'm going to share you another way to think of answering this question. Why would we work this way? Because the team decided to work this way. Managers shouldn't figure out for you how you do your work. They should let you figure that out. Now, not everybody would work well on a team, and some people nobody wants to work with. They're just not easy to get along with. But I think in our particular case, we were given the freedom, I had insisted on it, that to figure out for ourselves how it would work. I wouldn't have taken this job. They hired me to manage this team, and when they hired me, I told them, I'm not going to manage the team. I'm going to guide them into learning how to manage themselves. Because we're not usually given that freedom, and I know a lot about doing that, so let's do that. But every time I share this, I get 2 questions. One is, what's the right size for a team? And you could probably see that's a silly question, so don't ask it, please. But this is one of the first 2 questions I always get. How can you be productive with 5 people at one computer? And that's what we're going to explore here today. Now, some of you have probably seen this talk before, and thank you for coming to see it again. But I started working on this talk in 2012 because the very first question I was asked when I gave my very first talk on mob programming was this very question. And my technique in preparing talks is any question that gets asked after I give the talk, I determine, is that pertinent for this talk? Or do I need to make a new talk? And I'll write it down and I'll study it and I'll determine, should I had that in my talk? And that's what led to this talk. So the first time I heard that question, how can we be productive? How can you be productive with 5 people with one computer? I said, I don't know how we are productive. We just are. And we were paying a lot of attention, and this is what I noticed. When we worked separately, and the whole team noticed this, when we worked separately and added up our work, we got a certain amount of work done. There's the work we're working on, and it adds up to that much work. But when we worked as a team, we got a whole lot more work done. We actually calculated it to be about 10 times more stuff getting done. But it wasn't just mob programming. The team was learning, TDD, better practices for using short iterations, and other techniques as well. So I can't attribute this to just working as a team. But once we started mob programming, within a year, our productivity was way more than our productivity before. But I'm not interested in productivity. We're just measuring what got done. That's what productivity is. So, but we weren't just getting more stuff done. We were getting the more important stuff done, the more meaningful things, the things that the customers wanted. It was working more the way they wanted to work, and it was higher quality. In the 3.5 years, I continued on at this location where we had kind of developed this way of working. We only had 3 bugs introduced into our production. And we were taking our work that we did daily and whenever we could and pushing it straight to production after we were done. What this means is almost no bugs. In 3.5 years, we only had 3 bugs reported into our bug tracking system. In an 18-month period, we didn't have a single bug reported. This was much higher quality than what the team was able to do beforehand. And I think a big part of that is because of this. A system isn't the sum of the parts. It's the product of the interactions. We were learning how to have really effective interactions. So how can we be productive? I want to talk about the question. And to do this, I'm going to introduce my father. None of you probably have ever met him. I don't think he's ever come to France. But this is him when he was 5 years old, 20 years before I got to meet him. And when I met him, I thought, that's a good dad. He used to say this. A good question isn't for getting an answer, it's for finding a better question. So when you get asked a question, he said the first thing you have to do is say, naturally, we need a better question. And the first thing he told me would be, so he was an engineer. He was an engineer in the phone company, in Bell Telephone in the United States. He would say, you might not want to answer the first question they ask. The first question is often a trick question. Because whatever you say in answering that question, they want to use it against you about the thing you're talking about. So he was a pretty smart guy, so I took that and I said, okay, he would say, change it into a question you're willing to answer. This is just the first step. So I didn't like that word productive, and I want to talk about productivity. And you already know I don't like that word. So often combined in this space is the idea of efficiency, productivity, and effectiveness. In a condensed manner, efficiency is just about utilization. Utilization is a trap. We should not be striving to get utilization. That's just about staying busy. Productivity means we're getting things done. That's a trap. It doesn't matter that we're getting things done if nobody likes the things we're getting done, if nobody wants the things we're getting done. I want effectiveness, getting the right things done. And that really, truly is a process of discovery. This doesn't happen automatically. We can't know ahead of time what will be the right things. We'll discover in the doing. So I'm after effectiveness because efficiency can be measured just by measuring how busy everyone is. Productivity can be measured simply by whatever got done. Neither of these is useful to me, but can we measure that we got the right things done? Maybe we can't, but this is why I'm thinking in these terms. So I'm going to change that to being, how can we be effective with 5 people at one computer instead of how can we be productive? Because that is the way I hear the question over and over again. I've probably heard that question 500 times now because I've given a similar talk to my introduction to mob programming at least 500 times, and that's one of the 2 questions I always get. Matter of fact, I was interviewed yesterday for a company in Paris for a recording, and those were 2 of the questions that he asked me during the interview. I always get those questions. So I still wanted a better question. My father's process, the next step we take is we look for the point of view of the person who asked the question. So I would go into the audience after somebody asked that question, and I'd answer it, and then when the talk is done, I would go and ask that person, can you tell me how you think of things? I want to know their point of view. And it usually comes down to something like this. They believe it's more effective, but they really mean productive, to separate the work. When we separate the work, we'll get more done. That's what they kind of believe. And they'll say things like this. I want to get 5 things done, not just 1 thing. And I think that's a fallacy. When we separate the people, they're still working on 1 thing because they're going to combine their work. So a lot of times they're working on just 1 thing, but they're working on separate parts of it. Another problem here is that are we getting 5 things done or are we getting 5 things worked on? That's a different way to think about this. We're getting 5 things worked on, but how rapidly are they getting done? And I think they might not be getting done as rapidly as they could be. So here's the next thing. they will say it this way: I don't want to pay 5 people to do the work of 1 person. And again, I've already covered that. That, I think, is a fallacy. I don't think that really is describing the situation. Because normally, when we separate those people, they still need to talk with each other. So they have meetings and they send emails and they use Slack. Has anybody here used Slack? You've heard of that? Terrible, terrible way of collaborating. These things don't improve our ability to collaborate. We need to up our game, turn up the good on collaboration. So in my father's process, we learn the point of view of the person asking the question, and then we need to ask it from the opposite point of view. He would say we need to flip it over. So the opposite point of view is mine. What question would I form? If they're asking, how can you be productive with 5 people at 1 computer, what would be my point of view to ask a related question from the opposite point of view? My question was this: how can we be effective if we separate the people who should be working together? Now, I don't know, either one of these is not the right best question. This is getting us to the best question. But normally when we separate people, it looks something like this. They're working now in separate cubicles. Separate cubicles, according to studies that have been done over the last 20 years, make it harder for people to collaborate. Matter of fact, if you move to a separate cubicle 3 cubicles away from yours, your likelihood of just turning to somebody and talking to them goes way down, and instead you send them a message. This isn't necessarily good, but I think there's a much bigger problem. Often, particularly if these people are in different, let's say that's the database person, that looks like a software developer, there's a product owner, there's a tester, they're in different departments. Now that's not always, but that's very typical, and that really damages our ability to communicate or collaborate. So this led to a better question. This was probably the right question. I don't have time to do research. I'm a practical, pragmatic person working in an organization. So how can we prove one way is better than the other? And I don't really know how to prove that. Again, I'm not an academic or a researcher, but that was a great question, which led to this next question, which I thought was the most useful for us. What are the things that get in our way of being effective or effectively getting our work done? If I ask that to a group when I'm going to do a workshop, before we start the workshop, I might get, out of 20 people, I might get 50 answers. We won't do that exercise here today, but here was a real actual doing this in a workshop. They came up with 50 items. Look at some of those. The ones that my eyes zero in on, first of all needless meetings, any meetings, context switching, workflow interruptions, distractions, multitasking. Those are things we should not have, but there they are. Look at this. Dependency on other teams or waiting on a dependency, waiting on other teams, time zone differences, unclear requirements, unclear expectations, unrealistic expectations. I like the first 2, fatigue, hunger. And down here, these are my favorites. Too much noise, too quiet. 2 different kinds of people. We can now compare different ways of working and how many of these problems appear for us. This is what we noticed. When we worked as a team, a lot of these things faded away. I'm going to show you an amazing animation that shows how that happened. A lot of these things faded away. Did you see that? All of those faded away. These things faded away when we started working as a team. That represents us working as a team. So, of all those things we listed, I don't think any of those are problems. They're the results of some kind of problems. That means they're symptoms. And one of the biggest problems that I've seen, and I investigated this and researched it back in 1999 up to 2003, is something I came to call the question queue time. The question queue time is the amount of time that we must wait to get an answer to a question that is blocking us. Okay? I'm going to take a little sip of water. I let that sink in while I drink the water, right? This happens everywhere I go. I see it over and over and over. This is a huge problem. The waiting is waste. That weighting is waste. And we can use a value stream map to measure this. If we do a value stream map like this, in this particular case, the top line represents we're doing value-added work. The blue line represents, if you can see colors, the up and down line represents we're blocked with a question we can't answer ourselves. Then we find somebody who can answer the question, and we got the answer, and we're back to adding value. Now, the chart might not look exactly like this, but every time we get a blocking question, then we have to set the work aside till we get an answer. That's a blocking question. So we can use a value stream map to measure this in our work, and I encourage you to do so. I started using these quite a bit back in 2002 and 2003 to document this very problem. And most teams I worked with, or people I worked with, we had a lot of this. But I can demonstrate the harm of the weighting. So what if for every hour we work during the day, we get a blocking question? So we start in our work, we have to go ask somebody a question, the product owner, another developer, or whatever, and they respond immediately. They respond immediately. There's no queue time. But what if it takes them 2 minutes? We're going to waste 16 minutes in the day. What if it takes them 10 minutes? That doesn't look like much, does it? But if you went to your boss right now and you said, hey, I went and heard this talk, and the guy told us how we could waste an hour a day for everybody here. Would your boss say, great, let's do it? No, but we're automatically doing it, but it's way worse than this. Often it takes an hour, 2 hours, a day, 2 days. This is a huge problem. This is a massive problem. Okay, so how do we typically solve for that? We've got this thing we're working on. We got a blocking question. We have to set this work aside till we get the answer. Maybe we put a question to somebody and we said in an email, hey, I got to know about this thing. I don't know what this meant in the requirements. And they send you an email back saying, I'm in a meeting. I'll get back to you in about an hour. Okay? What do we do in the meantime? Somebody tell me. Switch. We work on something else. It looks like this. We increase inventory so we can stay busy. Remember I said busyness isn't good? This is actually massively harmful. This is not a good thing. We've increased inventory, which is work not started, and yet work started but not yet delivered to the customer, so they're not using it. Nobody's using this yet. Every bit of inventory we have is waste until somebody starts using it. I won't go into the details of what that means, but the inventory itself is waste in lean terms. And so this is what it looks like when we do this. It makes it look like we're green all the time. We're always busy. Isn't that good? It's not good. We're also blocked all the time. Now, I won't go into any more details on this. There's at least 5 or 6 things wrong with this. But you cannot introduce waste to deal with waste. That doesn't work. Right? Okay. So, are we dealing with the symptom? No, the symptom is we're not busy. The underlying problem is we're not getting answers to our questions. That's the problem we should be working on. And that means maybe we need to collaborate. So how did we solve for this when we started doing mob programming? I want to make it really clear. We didn't. It faded away for us. We didn't set out to solve this. Now, here's the issue. When the person we had the question for was on the team, we would answer the question immediately, often before the question was asked. If I had a question that I wanted to ask, the other person who could answer it was sitting with us, and they would answer it before I could even ask it because they're paying attention. They're engaged. Here's the thing. There were people that weren't on our team, and this really expanded our idea about what should a team be. And that was the first time we really noticed this was the product owners. If a product owner or a product expert wasn't available to help us, then we would find that we were blocked. So once we noticed this and we started talking to our product owners about it, we had a few of them who would guarantee that they would get back to us. If we sent them a message, we have a question for you, they'd get back to us immediately. And their work started getting done much quicker. And eventually, some of them, as in this case, would just come and sit with us when we were working on their stuff because they knew they could get their stuff a lot faster. And this is the thing. We call this one-piece flow. And once we realized that, it's like, yeah, we're achieving the lean concept of flow. Notice how large those letters are? That's the most important word in this whole talk. That shows you, that proves how important flow is. So at first, as we started studying flow, we found out about psychological flow, and then we got a little worried because we thought maybe it's lean flow versus psychological flow. So what's psychological flow? The idea comes from this fellow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I don't know how to say his name. I've listened to him say it in recordings when he's getting introduced or something. I'm still not sure how to say it. But he's the one who identified, studied, and coined the term flow for psychological flow. Psychological flow is a highly effective state that a person can get into when they're completely immersed in whatever it is they're doing. This happens for musicians, people writing books, people studying, people playing computer games. Flow can happen for lots of people. When we're in the zone is one way of thinking of this. So we were afraid when we're working as a team, we're not able to stay in the zone, that we're breaking each other's flow. So we started talking about it, and we were worried about this. And then as we talked about it, we felt we actually give each team member a freedom to organize their own way of thinking. So if you're sitting with the team and you go, I got to go think about this alone for a while, they can go do it. So they could go and get that individual flow on their own. I like to do it when I'm walking. If I leave the computer and just go take a walk, usually some good ideas will come to me and I can come back and experiment with those. Other people like to get in a dark room and meditate. There are other ways to get in the zone. Some people just get at the computer and start writing some code. But remember my father's process, I wanted a better question. And the better question we landed on was this. Maybe there's a kind of team psychological flow, because we felt we were experiencing flow, but we couldn't find any writing on this yet. Matter of fact, at the very time we were investigating this, somebody was writing research. They were just publishing it at that time. And we did our own research by collecting stories and pictures, blog posts, videos, whatever, of people that we thought looked like they were in flow. Here's a team that looks like, as a team, they're in flow. They're all focused on the same thing at the same time in the same space. Here's some kids learning to play guitar in their garage. And doesn't they look like they're in flow? These people, when they worked together, they created more than they could have done. They proved it. They created more than they could have created separately, right? So this is kind of the same idea. This is a different, very quiet flow. Some of you will recognize this. This is a famous place in the United States in Silicon Valley. Maybe somebody can give me a chance. Well, who might this be? What company might this be?
The real creator of Internet and mouses and stuff like that. Xerox, probably.
Xerox PARC. Palo Alto Research Center. I've read books on them. They were highly innovative. They couldn't figure out how to make any money with it, but they were highly innovative. So this is a session, and you can read about this. They did these sessions where I think the team got into flow. It was a kind of team flow, but this is my favorite one. These people here are doing a very famous, important operation on a 12-year-old child, I think in 1944. Everybody here is needed to do this work. Without all these people, the chance of success would have dropped. It's the first time this particular kind of heart operation was ever done. These people were working in flow. I was on a flight once with a surgeon. I didn't know he was a surgeon. We sat down next to each other. I'm flying from New York to London or something. And he saw me working on my slides. He says, oh, I studied that in school. Well, tell me about it. Yeah, don't sit next to me on a plane because I'll ask you about everything you know. So don't talk with me. He had to explain this whole thing to me. And what this came down to was they had practiced this over and over before they ever did it. Everybody there knew exactly what they were going to do. The people that are back here, they're not needed at this moment, but we want them to be there the moment they are needed. Everything about this is about flow. The flow is we're going to do a successful operation for this 12-year-old child. It's not important that you're not working at this moment, but you're paying attention. When it comes time for your bit of it, then you're going to be there. Imagine if we said, oh, when we're doing this part, why don't you go empty the trash cans, right? Let's keep you busy. That's not going to work. I loved that picture. Then we found this research. It's called Team Flow. And look at these things. If we have a collective ambition, something we want to achieve overall, and we have a common goal that aligns with our personal goals, we integrate all of our skills. We're going to start getting a chance to have some kind of a team flow. There needs to be open communication and the safety of communicating with each other. We have a mutual commitment, a sense of unity, a sense of joint progress. Those are some of the things we get out of this. Mutual trust. This is what this is about. We felt this is what we were achieving. So we got this team flow. But I want to talk about lean flow now. So there's this other kind of flow, which is where we started our discussion on flow, was this what you would call lean flow. In manufacturing, you can think of lean flow as the complete, this is very simplified, a complete production of one piece from start to finish without the queuing and without the inventory. Now that would be perfect, but you can do as little inventory, as little queuing as possible. What would that be like? So can we get flow in software development? And I kind of think we can, but I did find this, because manufacturing flow is going to be different than product development flow. But look at this book from Reinertsen, and he talks about this in 8 or 9 chapters, lots of ideas about achieving flow in product development. This particular one relates exactly to the question queue time, the principle of queuing waste. Queues are the root cause of the majority of economic waste in product development. Is that true? Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if it is true, we better do something about it. I think the big problem with queues is it results in longer cycle time, and that leads to many other problems. The longer cycle time causes a lot of other problems. So I define flow in software development that each story flows from idea to be delivered working software. Delivered means somebody's using it. It's not inventory anymore, and we do this directly. Without the queuing, without the inventory, without those distractions, interruptions, context switching, and multitasking that we saw in that exercise earlier. We would do this one at a time. We'd pick up something to do. Didn't matter to us how important it was. Just whoever our product owner would say, this is something we want to get done, we would tackle it. We're only working on one thing at a time, and we go through some kind of a process. Now, at an Agile conference, you want to be careful to make sure that every talk has a circle in it. So I put a circle in here. This isn't really so much an Agile conference, but it's closely related. Make sure you get your circles. When we achieved this is what we were finding. We were getting the right work done. And it was proven to us by our users. We were not wasting time on the stuff that didn't matter, which was always happening when we didn't work in a very rapid iteration, deploying stuff every few hours, proving it was useful to our end users. So all the wastes went away. And this is just some of them. So we felt we were achieving the lean flow, and that's what started our conversation. So with software teaming, what are we going to optimize for? This is the way I would always think of it. We're optimizing for flow and not the output of the individuals. If we're optimizing for the output of the individuals, we are going to destroy flow. We need to be very conscious of this, pay a lot of attention. We're not trying to get the most out of each person. That's efficiency or busy work. We don't want to, the harder some people need to work to get their work done, the worse off they're going to be. We want to make it easy to get the work done. So lots of collaboration. We are going to focus on getting the best from each person. That means we're going to change the environment of our workplace. So I can answer that original question. We're coming to the end of the talk. We might have time for a question or two from you. Remember the first question, I slightly modified it to be, how can we be effective with 5 people at one computer? And when I first answered this, I would just say, I don't know. Now, besides what you've learned today, I have a number of other things that I believe makes this effective. But this is the key one that we discovered almost 10 years ago, more than that. Here's the thing. It's not flow versus flow. It's flow plus flow. And the flows that we had investigated was psychological flow as an individual, psychological flow as a team, and lean flow. And some really bright programmer at a place I gave this talk shouted out from the audience, that is flow plus plus. That's it. That's a better joke than I could ever make up myself. And so I said, can I steal that? They said, of course. So they let me put this in my talk. So I like to end this talk with a thought that was given to me from an artist. I never knew this artist. He was dead long before I was born. But a gentleman that I was trying to learn some stuff from. In my days, when I was younger, I was a sign painter. I lettered on buildings and trucks, lettering for businesses. And I saw a person in my town near San Diego. I live near San Diego. He was in San Diego, who did beautiful, beautiful lettering. And I went to him. I found his phone number, and I called him and said, "Your lettering is so beautiful. I want to learn how to do this beautiful lettering. Can you show me how to do it?" And he said, "Well, I can show you, but that's not going to help you." He said, "What I'd like you to do is come on down, and I'll give something to you that will help you." And this is what he gave me. This saying from Robert Henry. Looks like that would be different than Henry, doesn't it? But I think this guy was from Ohio, so that's how he pronounced it. The object isn't to make art. It's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. Now, I learned that in my 20s, and it stuck with me through the years. What that means to me is we need to get the skills and the knowledge, learn how to apply it, learn how to build an environment where we can apply it, and that's how we get the better greatness. We don't get it from just trying to get the greatness. It's not something we can force. That's what he was teaching me. He did show me how to make those elegant letters, but that didn't help me. I had to embody this. So we're kind of to the end of this. Software teaming and the power of flow. Oh, and this is thank you, but I think in Japanese and in Swedish, and I should have made one for French. I apologize. I can maybe take a question if you want to. So, anybody have a question? There is a question. Do we need to get that on a mic, or do we just yell it out and I'll repeat it? Go ahead and yell it out.
Did you ever encounter a situation where you felt that programming was not maybe the best?
So did I ever encounter a situation where I felt mob programming wasn't the right thing to do? So in a bigger sense is where I'll address this. We must collaborate in the work we do. So we have to turn up the good on our ability to collaborate. I don't care how you go about collaborating. We happen to land on this idea of mob programming. But if you can find a better way to collaborate, please find that. But it's going to be very rare that we have any work we do that doesn't require some kind of collaboration. Unless we're writing the software for ourselves and no one else will ever use it, therefore we're the user, we're the product owner, we're the coder, we're the tester. We're going to collaborate with someone else. We got to get the best we can at collaboration. That may not have answered that completely, but I've never worked with a team anywhere that couldn't improve their collaboration by finding something like mob programming. And I think mob programming done well is easy to do, it's relaxing, and it's worth at least knowing the technique. You don't need to do it all the time. I'm not saying this replaces solo work or replaces pair programming. But it's another tool we can have available to us to make our work that much better. Maybe another question. There's a question there. Here comes a mic. Please go ahead.
Sorry for my English. You showed to us an example of a team that is composed of a person that have a different job.
Yes.
Do you think that two persons that have the same job working on the same project is always productive, or?
There's no always. So to answer that, we found the right mix on almost every work we did by following a heuristic. The heuristic was this: if we can answer our own questions, then we just work. If somebody feels like they're not contributing, maybe they'll go work on something else. Like they feel that they're not learning anything, they're not really helping, they go several hours or a few days, they just go work on something else. If we find we're missing some knowledge, we need to go get that knowledge. So the team could grow and shrink dynamically. But at first it was 5 developers. Then we really realized, the testers, the product owners, the DevOps, what we call DevOps now, but the operations people, and the product owners. These were people that we were always blocked when they weren't there with us, so we started expanding the idea of the team. Ideally, we have all the skills and knowledge we need. And if we can get that, we're going to we're going to get the flow that we're trying to get. Did that answer that for you? Yeah.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Excellent. Is there any more? We have time for one more question, and then we're probably done. There's one way up here. The handsome man in the front row. No, the other handsome man. No, I'm kidding. Okay, go ahead.
How do you make sure people feel comfortable to leave the station if they need to?
So how do we make sure people feel comfortable if they're the ones who have to lead to navigate?
No. People who want to leave.
Who want to leave? How to make that comfortable? That was like, we had 5 or 6 guidelines. The first one was, it's up to you whether you stay here or not. So there was never so we only had one little attachment to that, and that was just please stay close by. So if we need you, you come back right away. Because this is exactly what we found. The first 10, 20 times somebody would leave, we had a question for them within 5 minutes. So we started realizing, you better be ready to come back quickly. But we just made it comfortable by saying, it's up to you to decide. And for those of you who are more of the team leads on your teams, make sure you demonstrate that. Like if you say, I'm going to take a break for a minute, so that gives them the freedom to say, I'll take a break for a minute. What we usually hoped was that the whole team wouldn't leave at the same moment. So, 1 or 2 people's okay, we could keep working. But as long as the people are nearby. But we found more and more everybody would just stay. And then when you needed to take a break, you just go take a break. Sometimes we take a break as a group. But we had that guideline in place. It was one of our team agreements. It doesn't matter if you need to go outside and take a walk, if you want to take a nap, whatever you want to do. A lot of people think best when they're in the shower. So we would tell them, go take a shower, right? That's sort of a joke. Okay. I think we're done with the questions. We're kind of out of time, right? Thank you. Thank you.